As in the year 947, Emperor Valius V passed away. His death heralded the beginning of the largest scale civil war in Erebonian history. Valius V was a ruler with a somewhat debaucherous reputation, is said to have countless wives and concubines. To further the matter of succession, many of those wives came from prestigious noble families, all who began competing for power and wanted their offspring to take the throne. That makes sense. Within the days of Valius V, the death, the crown prince Manfred, the son of his first wife, was assassinated by an unknown party. Interesting. Following the death of the crown prince, the fourth prince and son of the first Emperor Valius' secondary wives, Prince Orthos seized the capital by force. Once in control, he declared himself the new emperor and began purging all those who dared oppose him. The coup set off a succession of counterclaims, and the three other princes also named themselves to be the new emperor. Backed by powerful noble families of their mothers, the competing princes ignited a bloody 5-year-long civil war, and thus the War of the Lions began. I see. So there's a multiple civil war. That wasn't just... usually when I think of civil wars, I think of only two factions. But it would seem, in this case, that is not the case. Scalp's all itchy and stuff. At first, the prince's armies were largely equal in terms of strength. It wasn't until Orthos, who would later become known as the False Emperor, revived. That being that it had been sealed under the city, that was the balance of power shifted to Testarossa, the Vermilion Knight. Yep, that was it. That was the giant under the Vermilion Palace. It was tainted by the blood of Zoro Argora. Saw the light of day once more. With his unmatched strength under his control, Orthos decimated his greatest competition in one fell swoop, and the fifth prince, Gunnar, was defeated. It seems it was inevitable that the armies of the other princes would share the same fate, but it was at this pivotal point the war took another surprising and sudden turn. Its unexpected development came in the form of another great knight, the Palatine Knight. Palatine? Palatinate. The famed champion was acquired by Prince Lucius, the sixth and youngest of the feuding brothers. With this power, he was able to defeat the army of the brilliant strategist and second Prince Albert. Victorious and backed by the knight's power, Prince Lucius was poised to challenge Orthos. Prince Gunnar and Albert's army, however, were not completely wiped out and decided to join forces with one another in order to oppose the other princes. It was thus that the war became one fought by three separate groups: Prince Orthos with the Vermilion Knight, Prince Lucius with a Palatinate Knight, and Princes Gunnar and Albert, who had no knight but compensated with the sheer numbers. The War of the Lions had been raging for 2 years now, and the chaos only worsened by the day. The Erebonians seemed fated to fall to ruin and darkness, fitting, perhaps, for a nation that takes its name from Erebos. I guess that means dark, or darkness, or shadow. 947, year 7317 calendar. 200 years after Heimdall was first founded, ruin rose more on monstrous wings from the depths of the earth. Its name was Zero Argura, the Dark Dragon, a malevolent creature with terrible power. It spread miasma throughout the capital that turned Heimdall into the city of the dead. That was what brought about the zombies. But its horror did not end. The evil dragon desecrated the corpses of the fallen, taking control of their bodies, and using them to attack those who remained alive, further increasing the legions of the dead. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So far I have, okay, good. I have every, I don't appear to be missing any except for the 7th, which I apparently need help to do. I assume that's going to be a story, a cutscene or something. The emperor at the time was Astorius. The second was forced to flee the city with what remained of his household and citizens. Together they retreated south and established the new capital in St. Arc. For 100 years, the Bane of Heimdall went unchallenged until Hector the First, 7th Emperor of Erebonia, resolved to capture the city. So this is after the War of the Lions was resolved. But I thought, so I might be missing something after all, because it feels, because Emperor Dreckles was the one that ended up, unless that was part of the cover story. Now I don't. Again, it's been so long since I've looked at it. I've kind of forgotten. Tom had proven to be the best ally to the beast, and the dragon's influence had spread over the surrounding area like a plague. Undaunted, Hector I led an army of brave knights into the necropolis in an attempt to free it. Their hearts were steadfast. Their arrival was met by legions of powerful fiends, and their efforts seemed doomed to end in failure. It was then that Hector I had a fateful encounter with none other than the great familiar knight, the Testarossa. The knight recognized Hector I as his master, and bolstering its immense power with countless weapons, the Emperor moved once again on the city to the decisive encounter with the Dark Dragon. The battle shook the city to its core, and at the end, the Vermilion Knight was victorious. The Scourge of Heimdall, the Dark Dragon, was defeated. However, the price of victory was steep. The corrupted blood that flowed from the dragon claimed Hector's life and defiled even the knight itself, placing a curse upon it. This is it. This must be the curse that the Emperor was talking about, and that Osborne was talking about. The corrupted blood that flowed from the dragon claimed Hector's life and the noble Testarossa became the Crimson Calamity, a demon with 1,000 weapons that only reacts to the blood of the Honor family. That's what they were. Yeah, that's why they needed Cedric during the Civil War. Well, the latest one, the Noble House. A destructive force was part of the Dark Dragon. It should control whatever we lost, would threaten the world and all who live in it. So it seems that the Hector then is the ancestor to the Honor family. It was sealed deep underground, never intended to be seen again. Meanwhile, a new city rose from the ashes of the old, and people once began to gather in Heimdall, and that was when the Vermilion capital. That was when the Vermilion capital that endures to this day was first built. A young man lays on grassy plains enjoying a nap in the peaceful setting. Oh, so this young man must be from Drycles. Before how long his rest was interrupted by the arrival of a second young man on horseback. The youth wore trappings of a knight, and his expression was deathly serious. His armor bore many rents and scratches, and his left arm was bound in a bloody bandage. The first young man had not seen him in several years, but a cheerful reunion did not seem its purpose. "You are right after all," the second man said gravely. "At this rate, the Empire's days are numbered." At this, the first young man rose from the grass. He was none other than the third prince of the Erebonian Empire, Prince Drycles. As a man with no claim to the throne due to his common mother and shunned by the other highborn princes, Drycles long left Erebonia behind, wandering from place to place, whiling away his days. 3 years prior, he had reached the land of Nord, where he remained ever since. Though left to his own devices since childhood, his nature was noble, and he quickly accepted by people of the Nord and lived peacefully among them. While he had left his homeland, he had not truly abandoned it in his heart. During his wanderings, his mother had passed away, but while she lived, she had told him something that would remain with him for the rest of his days. The blood flowing through you will not allow you to turn your back on Empire's suffering. Prince Drycles had turned those words over in his head again and again. What could a powerless vagrant like himself truly hope to do? The knight's arrival, however, signified two things. The war continued to worsen, and Erebonia was on a certain path to ruination. His mother was probably correct. Hearing the knight's words, he decided that was enough. He could ignore the pain of his countrymen no longer. That knight, incidentally, was called Roland. He was a childhood friend of Drycles and his confidant. Roland, he was but mentioned in the history. He was also the man Drycles had left in charge of things in his place before leaving the country. Prince Drycles set out preparing to depart. Before he could finish, he was met by several of the tall knights of Nord, their cross-shaped spears in hand. They too were close friends of Drycles, and they volunteered to accompany him and Roland, fearing the two men alone would not stand a chance. The next morning, the prince departed the village, a mere 17 men under 17. They bade farewell to the people of the settlement, and its elder wished them well. "May the winds and the gods be with you," he blessed them all. "Favor fortune you all." So that was 949. 947. Okay, so yeah, Drycles was indeed involved in the war, as I thought. But he was a lake. That might have been what helped him win, is 2 years. So he's almost halfway, roughly, I would guess, depending on, when the specific dates and months fall, but it seems that he was in actually a decent position to, as a sense of advantage, because as a latecomer, he and his had not, had the same involvement, so he was a little more fresh for the fight than the others were. Oh, gods of creation before the Septian calendar. In the beginning there were two great gods, one boasted unrivaled courage, the other unparalleled fortitude. Thus they descended from the heavens with their kin, and it was upon the dark land below they first met. Calamity. Their opposing natures incompatible. The two were irresistibly drawn to battle. And thus the struggle shook the heavens and earth. The goddess and the spirit lament for naught. As the land quaked, the skies were torn asunder, and the god's kin could only tremble in fear. After it seemed like what an eternity, their clash came to an end, but the end of mutual defeat. Their power spent, the empty shells of the two celestial titans were flung into the farthest reaches of the dark land. All that remained in their wake were terrible, their kin and the great power. So, that must be the two treasures that they were talking about. Prince Dreikel's... Okay, so this is a couple later, further into the War of the Lions. His opponents were armed with the 4th Prince Orthos and his Vermilion Knight, 6th Prince Lucius and his Palatinate Knight. Combined the forces remaining, they had Gunnar and Albert, who had magical golems under their control. Yet it was he, the illegitimate son of a commoner and latecomer to the war, who marched triumphant. His victory did not come without losses, however. During his return to Erebonian, Roland fell in battle. Not long after that, he met a woman who would change his destiny forever. The woman was none other than the daughter of Count Sandlot, the Lance Maiden, who hailed from the lakeside town of Legram. Yep. Charismatic personality and peerless skills with the lance earned her the leadership of a band of knights known as the Eisenritter and the moniker the Lance Maiden. Her name was Leanne Sandlot. Prince Dreikel and Leanne Sandlot may have come from wildly different backgrounds, but their concern for the innocent victims of the war united them in purpose to bring about an end of the bloodshed. It was those shared feelings that made them join forces. I wonder... I'm probably grasping at straws here, but I can't help but wonder if there's a link, like a an ancestral connection between the Lance Maiden and Laura, because they seem very much the same, and they're concerned for two of them, along with the warriors of Nord, the Eisenritter, and all the people of the nation whose hearts they moved, liberated one town after another, and were eventually successful in persuading even Prince Lucius, the owner of the Palatinate Knight, to fight for their cause. At the same time, the false emperor schemed to elevate the cursed Vermilion Knight to even greater power, to godhood. And thus the Vermilion Apocalypse was created. The demonic god emerged in Heimdall alongside a monstrous castle and vanquished the approaching armies of Albert and Gunnar in a single battle. Yep, the Vermilion Palace. It's the one that we stormed through in Game 2. Their end was anything but conventional, however. They were simply erased from existence. Even the Palatinate Knight could not contend with such a foe and was felled. As it was decimated, all who challenged the false emperor, countless crimson spirit veins spread out from the castle, stealing the very life from the capital citizens, as well as those in the surrounding area. Oh no. I wonder if that could help revive the demon dragon. Defeat seemed all but inevitable for Prince Dreikel as the Lance Maiden and their followers, but they refused to give up. Following the guidance of a kindly witch, they were led to the great night which slumbered. I wonder if that witch I bet was grandmother. Rosalia was her name? Something along those lines. But Emma's grandmother, I bet, led to the great night which slumbered on the outskirts of Heimdall. I can only guess that the night it must have been Valimar. After overcoming the trial, they were able to claim the Ashen Knight. Yep, I knew it was Valimar. And that's how he ended up with Dreikel's. With it in hand, Along with many of the supporters of the army of Prince Lucius, they marched on the capital for the final time, eventually making their way to the castle at its center. 3 days later, on the 4th of July, I see what they did there. In the year 952, the castle vanished from existence and the castle was liberated. In the blank... Oh, it's redacted. Interesting. In the blank following the blank, the Edge or Honor chose Heimdall as his base of operations from which he planned to rebuild the land of Erebos. I'm guessing so Erebos was what evolved into Erebonia then. Before long, the city became a blank and the region followed that as capital. The citizens, however, continued blank in the harsh post-blank world. They wished for a strong, caring leader to see them through these harsh times. It was an honor they wished was granted. After being recognized as a blank, or by both Holy Blank, it was a clear choice. He was crowned as emperor and became the first many rulers in the honor lineage. A surname? I don't know. Upon his coronation, members of the blank and Jaegers, I'm guessing that was Jaegers, were dispatched from honor, or the blank, to endorse the new ruler. The people of Zemuria had lost objects of their worship in the blank. However, the church, I assume, no. Maybe? It depends. I'm not sure if each square represents a single letter or not, because that definitely will make a difference. Provided them with a new way of connecting with Aidios, faith. In addition, by recognizing the blank of rulers across the continent, legitimacy maybe, they strengthened the foundations of its recovering civilizations. In the year 81 of the blank calendar, Septine calendar maybe, the blank emperor Arnor, blank had a great blank built in, I'm guessing that's Heimdall. So if that word is Heimdall, then each square does not represent a single letter. But again, there's no way to know. The blank was to be a bastion of faith and would serve as a site to blank for future emperors. But it also had a more significant role. Unbeknownst to the public, an artificial blank was created below the blank, a replica of the one that existed below blank. With presumably the churches, potentially the churches, increased presence, the desperate time followed the blank came to an end. People had lost their blank, but now had blank to sustain them in their search for the blank. Some years later, the darkness that gripped Zemuria, I assume, would pull them down to the depths of ruin. One of the holy blanks suddenly disappeared along with the blanks below the cathedral. It was the same day that the dark dragon Miasma laid waste of Heimdall. The war comes to an end. Emperor Valius. So was Emperor Valius an honor? It doesn't specify, so I'm not sure. 150 years after the capture by Emperor Hector, powerful families rose across the empire as a nation began to establish itself once more. Various regions gradually condensed into a handful of provinces. Family power recognized by the emperor and overcame overseers of their respective provinces, the nobility. Before long, they began to quarrel over territory, sparking a great many skirmishes between them in the process. During this time, the great knights akin to Emperor Hector's Vermilion Knights appeared across the land. Oh, oops. Across the land, and were quickly thrust into the center of these conflicts. The Azure, the Palatinate, the Ashen, the Arch, and the Arg Knights. So, the Azure Knight is the Ordine, before Crow had it. The Palatinate Knight is a mystery, potentially Le Guin's. I'm not sure. It doesn't. I could be grasping at straws, but her knight seems to be particularly powerful. If that's the case, though, that might not be the case, because I feel like they would have mentioned it by now, if it was. And the Ashen, of course, was Valmar. The Argent and the Uruk Knights were seized by various noble families, granting them overwhelming power and the ability to decide the outcome of battles. Also, without the Great Knight's power, saw them as bringers of ruin, and before long, certain groups began devoting all their resources to finding some way to combat these unstoppable threats. Thus gave rise to a new creation of Erebonian mages, golems with powerful spells, the Magic Knights. So that's how the Magic Knights came into being. Wow. So the Magic Knights were designed to combat the Divine Knights. The fact that we're able to even, at any kind of level, able to defeat them at all is pretty impressive. If they're on par with Divine Knights, that's a testament to how strong we become. I'm not even trying to brag. I'm just saying, like, that's the scales of power is hitting me, is all. Like many of the other groups of Era, the mages were obsessed with the glory of the ancient Sumerians and devoted themselves wholly to recreating it. The obsession was funded by an influx of Mira of lesser noble families and assistance from a certain faction. A certain faction can only be Ouroboros, potentially maybe the Black Workshop, although I'd like to bet Ouroboros. However, the Magic Knights were not without flaws. Perhaps the greatest failing is they were unable to be operated unless they could draw power from active spirit veins. They became a successful countermeasure against the Great Knights nonetheless, as spirit veins were always disrupted when Great Knight made an appearance. In the year of 572, the first golem that could be considered the prototype for the Magic Knights was created in the Workshop of Mages, serving a formerly powerful but now long forgotten noble family of the north. So yeah, that'd be the Black Workshop. Potentially both. Ouroboros might be involved as well, directly. Because it seems like they work hand in hand. At the height of 5 Arg, this headless golem known as Olagadia became a remnant of the mage's trial and error in development and other models of Magic Knights. Olagadia. I feel like name sounds familiar. I think we fought it before. Alright, so later on, 942, two shadows wavered in the corner of the dark underground room lit by a small bonfire. I see. So you feel an overwhelming presence, do you? A young maiden stood before the fire. A faint breeze passing through the underground blew her hair, giving it the appearance of a flowing stream of gold, contrasting with the massive silver lance in her arms. Oh, are you telling me you wish to turn back before we have even begun? If you are, then so be it. This is far beyond the power of mankind. A young, blonde-haired woman with red eyes, wielding a dimly shining staff, answered in an antiquated tone. The maiden shook her head and urged the woman to open the door before her. It bore the crest of a cross surrounded by spirals. The maiden's name was Leanne Sandlot, the daughter of the Count of Lorendrin Castle in Legram. Yeah, it definitely, if that's the Count, it definitely feels like the Viscount. It's not far from Viscount, it's not a far cry. Or she would be remembered by history as a lance maiden. Raised in Legram, known for its masterful teachings of warfare, she displayed skill in the art of battle far surpassing her age. At the young age of 15, she was already a match for the Castle Knights. Said to have a godlike mastery of lance on horseback, it wasn't long before she completely surpassed the other knights in competitions, amassing a veritable mountain of laurels and awards. The country was amazed by this young girl's incredible talent. The talent of the maiden was stronger than the knights protecting her, and spread the people began to flock to her. At age 16, she began hearing a voice in her head. The voice was austere yet magnanimous, told Leanne the duty she had to fulfill and the destiny she had to accept. Naturally, Leanne was upset by this voice only she could hear. That makes sense, I would be too. It wasn't long until she met the owner, a mysterious woman who called herself a witch. The witch spoke entirely of an entity sealed far below the castle, and Leanne's duty to become its master. Okay, so then Leanne would indeed become a Chevalier. Of which machine, I'm not sure yet. Its presence was overwhelming, and one claimed it would bring its wielder great power. It also had the potential to cause great devastation. After so much consideration, Leanne made the decision to undergo the trial. It was her way of trying to bring an end to the Empire's conflicts. In addition, as long as she held this power for her own, the noble families would never be able to abuse it. The witch was surprised by Leanne's answer, but recognized her determination and spirit offering to help. Thus, the door opened, and the Lion's Maiden and the witch proceeded into the trial. 5 years later, the demise of the Emperor would lead to the beginning of the largest-scale civil war history had ever seen, the War of the Lions. So, interesting. So then Leanne had become a pilot of her own divine knight 5 years before the War of the Lions. Forgive me. Oop, you may leave now. So this is 994. Yes, sir. Please call for me if anything happens. The head butler, now in his later years, bowed before leaving. The other man sighed deeply as he lied down on the bed. He was elderly and sick. His well-trained body was sturdy as a fortress still. Very few would ever doubt the condition of his health. However, he was clearly aging, weakening, and felt his end looming over the horizon. The Lionheart Emperor, otherwise known as Dracul's Rising Armor. So he was a honor. Okay, so then in that case, I'm guessing it's his mother was the Arner. I don't know why. I'm either, if it was clear, I missed it and I'm just dumb. But I'm pretty sure that what's his name? Valius. I don't think Valius was the honor. I think it was his. He was the 73rd emperor and nearing the age of 70. After ending the 5 years long civil war known as the War of the Lions, Dracul's had been working tirelessly for 40 years. Although he was enthroned the year the war ended, he lost his Nordic friends and parted with the witch. He and his vassals worked hard to restore the empire. I have no regrets. No need to worry about the children either. The Empress had also urged him to give up on thoughts of the past. She was the daughter of a marquis who was assassinated during the Civil War. The same one. Although she was much younger than he, they fell deeply in love, and she bore 2 sons and 2 daughters. Though she had passed several years earlier, their children remained healthy and would shoulder the burden of reconstructing the Empire's future. The next generation is being raised well. In the first half of the war, his best friend, Roland Vander, that's why I recognize the name, Roland Vander, gave his life to protect him, and even now, they're doing the same. Aw, it's very noble. I like it. And now Arner raised his son. The son was already in his 40s and he's flourished as a martial arts master while serving as a military officer. Then there was Sora's military academy. He had established it 20 years prior. It was a place for the best and brightest, accepting students from various backgrounds. He'd be surprised. He smiled, thinking of his good friend that had fallen deep into slumber at the end of the Civil War. The academy had been constructed at a place they had first met, where his friend now rested once more. I didn't realize that there was a grave at Thor's. I wonder if it was back by the old schoolhouse? Next time I play, I'm gonna play that game again. And next time I do, I'm gonna have to look for that. These long years weren't for nothing, then. As long as I can endure the thing Adios comes for me, that is. As long as I can endure that thing. Endure that thing. What thing? And who is he talking to himself? He cast his gaze in the corner of the room. There waited the nameless darkness. Ominous. Today it came again to speak with him, begging pathetically, threatening with intimidation. Subtly tempting, he knew what it was. For since that day, 40 years ago when he took the throne. Suppose I should be happy my children and their descendants won't suffer this same curse. Of course, that's not actually true. So if this is the War of the Lions, then Hamel shouldn't have happened yet. If he were not a man with the heart of a lion, he would surely have been broken by this daily torment long ago. On this day, he had a second visitor, Dracul's, an incredibly harmonious voice to call out his name, bringing a wave of nostalgia. He looked up to see a woman with hair like gold, flowing like gold, standing at his side. So it looks like the Lance Maiden is definitely not dead at this point, or she's been revived, or come back from the afterlife. The Salt Pail. On July 1st, 1178, at 5:45 a.m., a great catastrophe struck North Ambria, then a principality in northern Zamuria. A giant, white pillar suddenly appeared on the outskirts of his capital, Halizac. The pillar was composed not of snow or ice, but salt. As such, became the Salt Pail. A storm of salt spread outward from it, solidifying everything it touched. Despite only lasting for a few days, the effects were felt for months afterward as citizens fled south, seeking refuge. In the immediate aftermath of the catastrophe, a number of victims equaled about 1/8 of the country's population. The number rose nearly a third of the population with the inclusion of victims in the days to follow. After the incident, ants, why? Go away. Septine Church led evacuation procedures, provided aid, employed hundreds from the British Guild to help. In a short time, relief forces from Erebonia, Remferia, Jurai, Liberla, and the Republic of Culford had amassed in North Ambria. Meanwhile, the country's leader, Prince Balmund, who had fled to neighboring country at the start of the catastrophe, had returned to rebuild the government. However, he was met with violence from the enraged citizens for leaving them behind in their hour of need. In the end, he was forcibly removed from power, and North Ambria became a democracy. The remnants of its former armed forces were formed as the Northern Jaegers. Oh, so that's how that happened. Erebonia, their neighbor to the south, had contradictory views on the new autonomous state. On the one hand, it refused to recognize the legitimacy of the new democratic government. On the other hand, it eagerly welcomed the Northern Jaegers. Yeah, because they could be used for military and guerrilla and whatever, mercenary, black ops, etc. North Ambria's extreme poverty and focus on bringing in foreign currency meant the former soldiers were easily manipulated by the promise of imperial coin. Like I said, the Jaeger Corps went around the empire, hiring themselves out to nobility and newly developing businesses who were fighting over Septine natural resources. They turned out to be the perfect pawns for Erebonia to use in its proxy wars and internal struggles, as I predicted. It's blatantly obvious. Despite this, the massive amounts of mirror that flowed in from the empire helped save North Ambria from its dire straits. Kinda ironic, actually. 27 years after the catastrophe of the Salt Pail, the Empire annexed North Ambria as reparations for the Northern Jaegers' actions during the Imperial Civil War. As before, Erebonia's vast resources ended up lifting the former independent state out of its chronic poverty. Shortly after the disaster, the Septine Church restricted access to the northern half of the country. After the annexation, however, the Imperial Army's Intelligence Division began investigating the Pale, which had been classified as an otherworldly singularity. Interesting. One of the Intelligence Division's collaborators had been able to confirm members of the Church's Dominion retrieved the Salt Pail and brought it back to Arteria. Rumored that this piece of Pale remains on site in North Ambria. Alright, so we've made it to the Septine orbital shutdown phenomena. So we've made it to the Septine calendar. I'm wondering if this is leading off to the first orbital revolution. Let's read. February. The southern reaches of the Sutherland province. All orbital power came to a sudden stop in the area around Parma and Titus Gate. It had been a relatively mild winter, but without lights, communications, or heaters, the people of Parma found themselves subjected to cold and darkness for an entire week. Sutherland's provincial army was called in to provide aid. After a short investigation, the source of the outrage was determined to be a city-sized airship. It appeared over Valeria Lake in Liberl, the neighboring kingdom to the south. Sutherland province. Sutherland, home of St. Ark, right? So if that's the case, then yeah, it's part of Erebonia. Alright, so the floating structure at a height of 5,000 and a length of 3,000 arg. That's a big ship. The ancient Sumerian structure drew in nearly all orbital energy from the entirety of Liberl into itself. Thus, the southern reaches of Erebonia were affected as well. 3 days after the incident began, the Imperial Army's 3rd Armored Division moved with surprising speed from Dreknor Fortress to Parm, and then went on to Titus Gate, giving support to those who were affected along the way. The Army's orbital tanks ceased to function near the Empire's southern border. They also had a large number of steam-powered tanks available. Using combustion-driven models allowed them to get around with relying on orbital energy. Even the cannons themselves used gunpowder ammunition. Though it wasn't ideal, it was enough to allow them to respond to the situation. The leader of the 3rd Armored Division was Lieutenant Dex Vander. Hey! A member of the family tasked with guarding the Imperial Army, and a moderate in an army led mostly by warhawks. He felt conflicted as he led his division south into Liberian territory. The government's stated reason for his current orders were to protect citizens during the power outage in such Liberl. Okay, so that's the cover story, obviously. The strange part was that the steam-powered tanks, which were vastly inferior to the orbital-powered models, had been commissioned by the Imperial government and provided to the Army only a month before the incident. A little suspicious, a little convenient, perhaps. The 3rd Armored Division was the first to make it to the border. A number of other divisions were on their way. In the end, the military intervention was stopped thanks to Prince Oliver of Erebonia's Imperial family, Brigadier General Cassius Bright of the Liber Army. With the arrival of Liberl's functioning airship, the Arsai, as proof they could handle the situation without Erebonians' assistance, they were given the time they needed to restore power to the region. As orbital energy returned to the southern reaches of the Empire, so did peace between the two nations. Certain individuals, however, it was clear that the Faceless, the Anguis of Ouroboros, responsible for engineering the incident, had connections to Erebonia's intelligence division. So at this point, we're already seeing Osborne hands in play, and not just him too. At this point, it was what year? 1203. I don't remember what year. So this must have been a few decades, because now all the current players are starting to emerge. Well, the older ones. Because this must be a few decades before I enrolled at Thor's. The Army's orbital tanks ceased to function near on the Empire's southern border. They also had a large number of steampunk tanks available. Combustion-driven models allowed them to get around without relying on... Using combustion models allowed them to get around with relying on orbital energy. Even though the cannons themselves used gunpowder ammunition. Now, it wasn't ideal. No, I already read this. Okay, as orbital energy sort of to the small amount of during this would later come to be known as combat shells. Wait, hang on. So, Anguis and Jerry had the smaller autonomous weapons the Faceless utilized. Oh, so that was the birth of combat shells such as Argotlum. Interesting. Oh, that's a lot to take in. Holy shit. Oh, my brain hurts after that. Yeah, I think it might be time to call it a day. Guess I'll be heading out. I don't really expect you was still here. I can't sit here and let this play out. We need to take care of Ash. Might upset the faculty. Yeah, just a bit. Now go for it. Now's the time to act. I doubt the government's been playing the long game with this. You have a chance to figure out what's going on. Gonna hit up some people I know, gather information, get in touch if I come across something worthwhile. Talking about Hugo? Good idea. We can get intel from him. Got it. Thank you. Be careful. Now, worries? Ain't gonna keep contract employees like us in lockdown. Yeah, they're the ones that need to be careful, though. Yeah, I think that's a... Oh. I am completely reeling at everything. This whole... hell. So we are into the end game now. This is indeed the final chapter. And we will pick up next time. We're gonna save now. Alright. I do appreciate you guys for lurking and checking in as always. Alright. And I'll see you guys next time. As always, this has been Twilight Alpha. I'm out.